Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 600 of Russian war with Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Alexey Arestovych, and Nikolay Feldman. Today, a lot of attention is still on the Gaza sector and the actions by Israeli Defense Forces. They also address elections in Poland and curiosities of Chinese-Russian relations, as well as the fact that the main danger to Ukraine in these dire times is presented by its incompetent leadership. It was a rather fiery stream. Special thanks to Bill for your super thanks. Thank you guys for supporting our channel. We do appreciate that. Do not forget to click like and subscribe, and share with your friends if you think they should see this information. And with this, let's deep dive into day 600. Enjoy. Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolay Feldman, and you're watching Military Diary, War Diary with Alexey Arestovych. Good evening everybody. Yuriy Romanenko is absent today. We think he might still join, but right now he is running late. So let's start in just the two of us format. Elections in Poland will probably lead to change of government. Government coalition is most likely winning, led by Donald Tusk, and he probably will be new prime minister. Let's start with this news. Rather important elections for Ukraine. How do you gauge the results of that, Alexey? So the calculation of votes is still going on. We're waiting for the official statement, but we understand that the coalition, even though informal, has won. But the president is still from Peace Party. And if they'll be changing a government, it will go through a political crisis of a sort, because president might lean for Peace to form its own coalition and try to also influence the presence in government, and there likely will be a crisis where the president of the country is from the Peace group, and Congress and most government will be from his opposition. Now about the overall character of the opposition in Poland. Peace is the right-centric party. Very approximately, it would be as if freedom, like Ukrainian freedom, won in our country. But it's my just general comparison for people who are not aware of the details of their political nuance. And Donald Tusk, in this case, and his coalition, they're pro-European. They're more left liberal, central left in their majority, and they're way more loyal to Ukraine. They are concerned with matters of Volyn tragedy, but they spend less time considering that historic event, and they're looking more for participating actively in European Union, and they're eager to help Ukraine to get there, while Peace was more oriented to the right-leaning poles. So for us, it means a probability of betterment of our Polish-Ukrainian relations. And I've met with leadership of those coalition parties in Warsaw about a week ago with some of their representatives. They are ready to make serious steps towards Ukraine. Now the question is, are we ready for these steps to be made? My attitude, Yuri's attitude, I think people are rather aware of. You can tell yours, but our general mine and Yuri's statement is that our government, unfortunately, doesn't have a strategic motion in this way. Our government makes tactical steps, and sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. I'm a careful skeptic right now, because our government, I suspect, might just waste this opportunity to make relations better. I'm of an opinion that the real change of Polish-Ukrainian relations will come from the new generation of politicians old generation, I'm afraid, is incapable of doing it. Today we had an interview, Alexey, with Kaminsky. He is the speaker of the lower chamber of their Congress. And we talked about a lot of things that are unfolding in Poland. He's very optimistic towards what's going to happen in Poland in the next half a year. He talked about what will happen if the current president will create a coalition with more right-leaning members, and then the government led by Tusk will come to power, and how it will unfold likely. So they are very eager to help Ukraine, and our daily dialogue with them is very important to be had. And yeah, I would say that Kaczynski was a very famous politician, well-known politician in Poland. When Kaczynski died, and he was also in peace with him. So when, after the death and tragedy of Kaczynski, he left PiS and he remained more central left when PiS took more of a right turn. And European Union gives a lot of different opportunities for its members, by the way. That's the lessons we can learn from Poles. If we know how to, first of all, treat it, work right with European Union, because European Union can aid even individual villages in the country, in the candidate country, so, and change the life, material and immaterial aspects of life in this settlement. 90% of our country have no idea how to do that. They don't even know that this exists. So Poland has unique experience because they have a lot of smaller settlements, smaller villages, and they, integrating in EU, they used a lot of these opportunities. So they can be a good guide for us in the future. Now, Alexey, let's go to the next big event of these weeks. Is European Union condemned Hamas attack on Israel, which led to deaths of about 1,300 people, according to the official statement, the biggest tragedy since the Second World War, and casualties in Israel. And there are a lot of important positions defined in European statement. In EU statement, it says that Israel, first of all, has the full right to defend itself in accordance with international law. They underline the importance of providing humanitarian aid to civilians in the area of conflict. And Charles Michel was the leader of European Committee who announced that, who made the statement. And European Council is decisively condemning Hamas and its cruel, non-selective terrorist attacks on the whole Israel. And it's very important, according to the statement, to prevent regional escalation. So I was curious to ask you, have you had a chance to read it, and do you think it matches the current spirit of the day? This is a very important progress, Nikolai, because up until today, Israel, for the most part, was listening to criticism from EU. We know the left liberal position of EU, which is very loosely based on the anti-colonial discourse and sympathy to Arabs who are supposedly being tortured by Israel. So it took a serious wave of terrorism, 1,300 people dead and hostages of women and children, for EU to change their position and take a rather stern statement. This is a good statement, I think, in my opinion, and it's an important one. But there is one more thing that people are not talking about. Hamas exists only because there is the Gaza sector. No Gaza sector, no Hamas. That sector, as an enclave, funds Hamas. It is controlled by Hamas. It exploits Palestinian people and prevents their integration and relations with neighbors and Israel government as well, and makes a bet on terrorism instead. And after their losses, they once again go in a cycle when they scream that we need to unite and we need to be strong against the enemies, and then the cycle repeats itself. They are making a lot of money in agree schemes. It's a criminal terrorist concoction, And it exists only because of high density populated group enclave of the Gaza sector. And I treat Hamas as a criminal enclave which got a religious political colors and is actively playing on the political scene of the world, terrorizing its alleged enemies. And that makes a good condition, a good lead in to destruction of the Gaza sector, not physically to erase it completely from existence, but change its statement, change its form. Israel cannot veer away from this problem now. It's very sharp. Any attempt to downplay the role of Hamas will probably get any leadership in Israel toppled immediately. And it is understandable that European Union cannot include such position on Hamas in their official document, but everybody understands that without ground operation, this matter is not solvable. And the question is if Hezbollah might join the fight and start war with Israel in the north. And today there are some publications that right now Hezbollah's capacity of using UAVs and some kind of missiles actually exceeding the capabilities of Russian Federation at this moment. If it is so, that'll be a very difficult war for Israel on two fronts, and somewhere there is Iran in the distance, and there could be some Iranian-funded groups and troops coming to fight in the north as well against Israel. So Israel is at a very serious junction. They have mobilized about 360,000 people. They are getting ready for the big war, because 360 would not be necessary just for Gaza. A third would be enough. So that means that they are getting ready for a large-scale conflict in the whole Middle East. They already are responding to the territory of Syria, on the territory of Lebanon. And if Iran gets in a fight, imagine how that will escalate. So United States is also bringing its fleet closer to probably provide aid with hostage release operations. And we see a very heated up Middle East right now. And there are some people, doomsayers, talking about the Third World War. So we're not talking about Third World War, I don't think so. Maybe a very slow, crawling, creeping eventual chain of events, but not a global one. And a lot of things now in Israel depend on wisdom and calculation. It's difficult to rely on wisdom from Hamas, so definitely Israel is in a better position in this regard. Hezbollah seems like they are not too inclined to attack Israel. They already are attacking each other in the north, but they're doing it on a smaller scale, just tactical hits. And it seems like Lebanon also is very reluctant on having this conflict to blossom. And we're somewhat in a similar position as on the precipice of the First World War, when nobody wanted war, but it still happened. So we'll hope that with countries' reluctance, they will not start the actual fight. We'll see in a few days after start of the ground operation by Israel how Iran and Hezbollah, their funded group in Lebanon, will react to that. There were some notes about Iran sending some troops to Syria, Alexey, and there was also a message from Iran, as if Iran talking on behalf of Hamas. And that message came out and said that one of their spokespeople said that Hamas will release hostages if the Gaza sector will not be attacked. But Hamas themselves, they have denounced that statement. Yes, Nikolai, I suspect that negotiations for hostages are being conducted since the beginning, since the first day of this attack. But I think Iran may find itself in a situation when they cannot not join the fight, because they've been the main actor heating up the conflict in Israel, and they'll have to probably react to whatever happens there, because they're too vested in their propaganda in this regard, even if they don't want to logically do that. So we'll see. We'll see how they react to that. We'll see what happens after Israel Defense Forces enter the Gaza sector. Also, look, Alexei, Red Cross also demands Hamas to provide immediate access to hostages that they hold in the Gaza sector. And the organization states that they work closely with Israeli officials, and they're ready to help with the hostages. They still estimate the number at a couple hundred. 199 families officially were informed about their family members being held, suspected being held as hostages in the Gaza sector, and there are 10 children among them. And we also have a statement from Cardinal Pierre Baptiste Pitzbala, who is the Patriarch of Jerusalem, who says that he will eagerly exchange himself for children. At the same time, in the same statement, he says you cannot talk to Hamas because it is too difficult. So all the humanitarian efforts that are supposedly important, they would benefit Hamas, but Hamas itself is not really going to liberate hostages. Well, yeah, because Nikolai, they took hostages to trade things and events for favors, to trade them for benefits, but the situation will drastically change with the beginning of the ground operation, and there may be a situation when they would not even care about exchange anymore. But of course, Israeli government will do their best to try to exchange citizens captured by Hamas, and it's not just Israeli citizens; it's citizens of EU, America. There are, I think, 11 Americans among hostages. So the next stage of resolving this problem is the ground operation. How it will unfold, what will be the results? Will Iran and Hezbollah join the fight? Will the United States join the conflict if needed? This will be defining for a lot of things. So look, international pressure is being conducted on Israel so that they don't do the ground operation. Ex-head of Mossad came out and said that Israel should not remove the blockade of the Gaza sector, despite the international pressure on Israel to do so. According to his statement, international community do not understand that civilians in the Gaza sector actually participated and voted and partook in Hamas actions, even though they may not be exactly Hamas. So, yeah, an interesting point here that the borderline was destroyed, the wall was destroyed, the barriers were destroyed by the Hamas fighters, but they were actual citizens of Palestine, so-called, who actively partook in killing peaceful citizens of Israel, who actually poured into the breaches and actively partook in killing and murdering sprees. Of course, there were people in Gaza who are not part of Hamas, who denounce Hamas as well. They cannot do it actively, but they are against it. And we see that most of them are trying to move south, trying to hear to the calls of Israel to free the north of the Gaza sector. So we also heard some discussions about some humanitarian corridors. Israel actually allowed for some food to be transported to Gaza. And by the way, I think they did right, because that determines if they'll be supported or isolated on the international arena, and I think it's a good step for Israel. Yeah, right, they were transferred some water and some food, exactly. So I think Israel will be able to destroy Hamas or cause significant damage to Hamas, even when humanitarian aid will be coming through. And when Israeli Defense Force gets there, no 6-hour peace talks or humanitarian effects will deter their action. And the world outside will see that as a positive initiative from Israel, so I think that was a good decision. Another important news circulating, referencing UNICEF, that since the beginning of bombing of Gaza, somehow over 700 children were killed. Israel denounces this accusation. And I would put the question here, how do we understand what is propaganda, what is not propaganda? Who can actually calculate these numbers? That UNICEF would come out with this. And in this article, it actually does say, yeah, not exactly 700, but they're saying probably 700. I think UNICEF is using the data being provided, being fed to them by the authorities of the Palestinian autonomy, whoever is in charge of health, I guess, health ministry, whatever there is. but how much you can trust these numbers. Because at the beginning of this attack on Israel, Hamas declared that they don't have any hostages, right? So the number of 700 dead children needs verification. How seriously can one verify that during the isolation, during the blockade, during the active military action? It's difficult. But I would say that death of one child, be it Arab child, Jewish child, it's a tragedy. And of course, it is difficult to avoid these casualties in the current situation, but Israel is actually doing their best to minimize civilian casualties. And I remember I brought the approximate comparison. When Allies dropped 4,000 bombs on Dresden, there were anywhere between 25 to 100,000 civilians killed. When Israel dropped about the same number of bombs, or even half of that, on the Gaza Strip, they only had 2,000 casualties, approximately. So this army is probably the most specialized army that cares about civilians compared to any other military force in the world. The way Israel has to consider civilians and collateral damage, no other army usually does. So they are, I believe they are still playing by the book, even though it is difficult after having seen, those casualties after the attack by Hamas, some beheadings and burned bodies and killed families. But they're trying to stay in the framework of European Union, of international agreements. And I think they are generally successful because otherwise they would not have gotten the supportive resolution from European Union as they did. And I wish them good luck and success in this operation because it is a very complex one. The power of Israel is that they can try to eliminate Hamas and try to minimize civilian casualties. I don't think there's any other force that is more competent to do that. The best message Israel can show is that during this operation, they were providing aid to civilians and paying for this aid and providing this aid, even if there are refugees on, Egyptian land, for example. If Israel would provide desalination equipment or just giving water to them, this already is in support of the fact that they do not want to cause additional suffering to civilians. Right. So this plays an important part in the international view on this matter. Okay, so Zelensky's visit to Israel is not going to happen. Netanyahu cabinet refused to host Zelensky's delegation, considering it to be not timely. We discussed it in our previous streams that it would be a strong move if that would happen, but refusal to accept Zelensky in Israel became a reason to criticize Netanyahu and his cabinet. And they're accusing Netanyahu of some negotiations and dealings with Putin, and refusal to host Zelensky's organization is one of the ways that Netanyahu can better his position in Putin trade of favors. What can you say about Netanyahu of his actions? I don't think it's a wise politics. We have a lot of things we can bring to public attention in regards to Zelensky's mistakes, but right now he's representing Ukraine, people of Ukraine, visiting Israel. So Netanyahu, if he doesn't want to see Zelensky, specifically Zelensky, he would need to perhaps add additional wording to that denial, saying that we do value the aid and support of Ukrainian people to Israel. And that's where you separate official visitor from the people the person represents. So that could have been an important way to present it. Also, among the casualties of the attack, I think there are 12 citizens of Ukraine. There are also a lot of Ukrainian descent people in Israeli Defense Force. So not even talking about general number of Ukrainians living still in Israel, Ukrainian expats and those Ukrainians who moved to live there. And as somebody wise wrote, now it's most difficult for Jews who are born in Ukraine because they're now being attacked twice in the modern world as Ukrainians and as Jews. And that's what Netanyahu cabinet should have considered. I think this is a mistake they made. All right, let's go to Ukrainian news. During the last 7 days, our defense forces, using UAVs, destroyed 428 units of Russian equipment. As reported by Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhail Fedorov. Let's show the picture that Mikhail posted in his media. Absolute record from the drone army. Our military destroyed 428 units of Russian military during this week. UAVs were very effective in defense, so Russians have minus 101 artillery units, 88 armored vehicles, 75 tanks, 52 anti-tank machines, 77 trucks. So thank you to all the military that contributed to these successes. Also, our military states that they don't see enough drones provided by our government. I don't know if these are the troops that don't get them somehow and others do, or is it a joint statistics from all over the front in these attacks? Or maybe drones are being delivered mostly by volunteers. What can you say, Alexey? I don't know exactly how this table was compiled, but one of my classmates who is fighting in one of the key directions, and he actually talked about looking for FPV drones, and he's looking for supplies, maybe if I can help him to get more drones to his front. When I asked him about government, he said, well, you know, government. So we cannot say that they are not providing UAVs. It's not so, but we can also not say that they are fully satisfying the demand of our troops fighting on the front. Drone is way simpler than ballistic missile, right? So, as I said before, there are only 3 principles in their army. Too bad, too little, not enough. So, regardless of our current capability to produce drones as a country, they will never be enough. Main drones right now are being transferred by private citizens going around the government, sending that to the troops individually. And FPVs, they're basically expendables, right? You get it flying, it goes and destroys something. So they need a lot of those. And I want to also address here, a lot of people are kicking my statement that we need to go into defense mode. And they're dropping the second part of my phrase that needs to be done in order to get more resources, get more reserves ready, and then continue our offensive. So look at the Russians storming Avdiivka. How effective are we in defense? According to statements made by Russia, 90% of personnel who were attacking Avdiivka were wounded and dead. And of course, we understand that Avdiivka is one of the most significant strongholds on the whole front line on our side. But see how effective are we in grinding them down when we are defending. Of course, we cannot be fully in defense mode because we'll give initiative to the enemy in this case. And as I said, defense needs to be active and maneuverable. We need to also do counter-attack operations where we see fit, where it is beneficial for us and it's reasonable to conduct them, to capture certain positions and liberate our territories where we see fit. But we cannot afford ourselves to copy this style of Russian command when they just throw people to be destroyed and grinded. Another curious thing we saw this week, among destroyed vehicles, APC-50, which was in the middle of 20th century on the Soviet roster, and APC-90, which was only produced as experimental machine, just a few of those. So it means they indeed threw everything at Avdiivka, and they got their asses kicked. Angry Odessa citizen Alexander Kovalenko has rather good military reviews in his vlogs, and he did bring today in one of his media that the whole Eastern Front is about 500 tanks. Near Avdiivka, Russia has 450. Most of them are there. There's some pretty crazy numbers on that part. I'll even quote some of these, what's happening there. And I want to just reaffirm and develop that idea later. So here is the numbers he is reporting. Konstantin Moshevets elaborating on these numbers too. I'll read the details of the group that is there. 8 special motorized brigades, 15 tank regiments, 11 more regiments rifled motorized, 22 motorized regiments, 3 motorized brigades in reserve, 1 tank regiment in reserve. Rather impressive group allocated for Avdiivka. They are using artillery from the other parts of the front that they brought here. An average number of shells that Ukrainian military is using on the Russian side for the first time actually was higher than the number of Russian shells shot at Ukraine. The first time we actually shooting more at Russia since the beginning of this war. And he's saying that then there were days when we could only shoot 4,000 and they were shooting 60,000 shells daily at us. So out of 4,500 shells being used daily on average, they are used, 50% of them are used on Avdiivka. The rest are really starving, maybe 1 shot per 50 kilometers. I think Takmak probably has more activity than that, but the results in Avdiivka are horrible. They moved a little bit in the north, a little bit in the south, and we already repelled these attacks, despite their full advantage in tanks, armored vehicles, and aviation. We are very effective in destroying their troops when we defend our positions. If Russian military complex can build 100 tanks and can refit 300 from the warehouses, and we are destroying 200 per month, we can destroy. I think just this month we did 203. You can imagine how long can they be on the offensive. This is one of the most effective ways of our effective defense. This is how we can break the enemy's intent and plan to survive for another year until elections in the United States. In this rhythm, they will not be able to survive for another year attacking Ukraine. In 6 months, they'll be out. They'll be depleted. And their political leadership will still try to push them to the front. So if we are in defense, that means that for them it is like a red flag, so they want to keep attacking us. That means that Ukraine is tired and is defending, so they'll be sending more and more and dying more and more. So that's my message. That's what my message was about. We need to create a defense line similar to Surovikin, loosely speaking, Surovikin line, just to not go into details of engineering support and provide for resources to do maneuverable defense in other parts of the front to make sure we effectively grind their resources, because their leadership will continue throwing them to fight. We see that in Avdiivka, but we need to make sure our other parts are as well fortified as Avdiivka. Avdiivka is the only part where it's properly reinforced with concrete and rebar and everything. They gathered a lot of troops from all the parts of the front, and what? And nothing. And of course, we can do concrete fortifications all along the front line, right? Yeah, we are producing a ton of concrete, producing a lot for internal needs, so we could do at least as good as Russians did in the south. So that's the main message that I was sending in that criticizing post addressed at our current leadership. We can look at the other directions. Near Kupiansk, they're also actively trying to attack us. Near Svatova, they're pressing hard, but they are failing to capture anything. Today, their military reported that they failed to hold on the railroad near Bakhmut. Our troops went further, beyond the railroad, so we cut the road Gorlovka to Bakhmut. And that means, remember, the failure of our defense started after the enemy captured this region and crossed the railroad in our direction. Now we are in that position, and the situation starts to change, not in their favor. Very much not in their favor. We'll see what's happening, what will unfold in the next week, even though I am against us concentrating efforts near Bakhmut. It is still a serious achievement of our troops, and we cannot not welcome it. And since it was made a decision, there was made a political decision to continue on Bakhmut, because it's political leadership that chooses targets, not military leadership. And since we're working there, let's at least welcome our successes on that part of the front, especially that people on the front who are actually fighting, it's definitely not their fault that they're being thrown in less effective strategically areas of the front. They're still heroes. And they deserve their military glory to the highest extent because it was a very difficult operation. A lot of non-stop attacks of Russian troops, some of the better ones. That same 89th paratroopers regiment that was being trained at Russian intel, military intel facilities, according to special forces. Even they were repelled and they suffered significant losses. But we have generally pretty good perspectives in that area for the future success. Now we look at Zavetное Желание and Vuhledar down south. Near Vuhledar, there is some motion of Russian troops being noticed. Simple reason is that from Vuhledar to the center of Volnovakha, you can see at 5 o'clock on this map, is about 30 kilometers. And one of the key tasks of our of the railroads that we want to cut from some parts of the front is only 8 kilometers away. And that's a threat even from mortars that we could use on that railroad, if not even bring other long-reaching artillery. So they cannot afford that, and they're trying to push our troops further north. And that's why they're starting some motion near Vuhledar to push us back up. Novomikhailivka, Sladkaya, and Stepnoye, this is where they concentrate their efforts. We'll see if they succeed to push us. Yeah, here in that area at 3 o'clock, they'll try to push to the left. So that's the ideation. We'll see how they realize it. You understand the logic, right? So the fight is going around the railroad. If you want to understand the logic of war, follow the railroads, if it is a ground warfare. Now, Zavetное Желание and Novodonetskaya. So the enemies continue to attack us, our positions. There are no significant change of front line. The front stopped, even though it was very promising initially. But if you go further to Takmak, here we continue pushing forward, and Russian troops try to counterattack us on the flanks from 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock here. And you can see a little protrusion here. They're trying to attack us, but we're pushing further. 7th and 76th regiments and divisions there. And Kapani, that one on 9 o'clock, they also tried to squeeze us on the left, but we successfully hold the flanks and continue pushing downward. And there are a couple of heights near Novoprokopivka down south at 7 o'clock, and one on at 5 o'clock Verbovoy, you can see on the map. So those are two heights where they established certain outposts, and we need to find a solution to capture them that will allow us to control this area of the front. I think we need to find more reserves. I think we have them, and they probably will be brought to the front. When command will find a way to go around these heights or find a way to capture them, we'll see. But the situation will change then. At least nobody, for now, is folding the counteroffensive effort. It still goes here near Bakhmut and in Takmak protrusion. It's slow, it's a grind, but we continue doing it. And in other parts of the front, our troops are conducting active defense maneuvers. So in regards to artillery capabilities of Russian Federation, there was a curious publication in Washington Post that by ships, North Korea is transporting weapons to Russian Federation, and there are two vessels, Angara and Maria, that are doing the transport operations. Supposedly Korea is producing two types of ammo, 122 rockets for the Grad systems, Russian MLRS, and also some of the artillery shells that Russia is starving on. And John Kirby stated that North Korea sent over 1,000 containers of military equipment and supplies to Russia. in the last month. So that kind of coincides with the Russian actions near Avdiivka, near Kupiansk, Svatova. Do you connect these supplies directly with what's happening? No. En masse, these shells have not gotten to the front yet. Some of them have already got there. We've seen them for about the last 3 months. But that was not enough to organize the whole offensive just on the Korean supplies, North Korean supplies. But this drop exists. That this is just a drop in the sea, but they are supplying Russia indeed. And by the way, our people are saying that they're seeing some North Korean anti-tank missiles. They captured some of them on the front. So indeed, North Korea has joined the war on the side of Russia, and I think United States and other allies are looking at that, and it will lead to certain actions. For now, however, I would say they're not too important to change anything on the front. Plus, Korean shells are very capricious, and they need refitting, because even though the caliber is the same and the Soviet origin of the Korean systems, there are some peculiarities. And the distance and the need to adjust them for use, that doesn't really help for them to get easy supply from Korea. But this factor exists, and if at some point it becomes significant, large-scale issue, then we'll have to address this matter as well. Something very significant happened. I haven't thought that during this conflict the number of our shells will exceed the number of artillery shells that Russia is sending at us. I should remind that artillery is the main means on the Russian side that bring them most results. 70 to 85% casualties on our side is due to Russian artillery. And Russian military doctrine, same as Soviet military doctrine, artillery is the main weapon, where aviation is a supplemental type of force. On the West, it's different. Aviation is primary, artillery is secondary. But looking at this war in Ukraine, they are actually beefing up artillery systems and their concepts of their use on the field as well. So this is an interesting trend, and I'm not sure if Korean supplies will be able to shift that trend, to break it. It seems to me they will not be able to form robust supply lines. I have certain skepticism about the capability of North Korean resources to supply a full-scale war here in Europe. Well, look, Russia is actively using their advantage in air. They're using Air Force because we cannot parry them effectively, and they're using some gliding and precision, somewhat targeted munitions. And they attacked Kherson today. There are messages from all over the front line about them still using Air Force. Of course, Nikolai, that's why we're waiting for more elements of our air defense systems that our allies are providing. So, in the meantime, Russia definitely is using their advantage wherever they can. They also modernized their old, cheap, relatively cheap bombs. They added a special system to it that has a significant improvement, and it can reach without 20 yards of the designated target. So this is a serious threat for stationary objects and civilians. And for us, the only way to really parry that is strong air defense systems and F-16s. There were a lot of dates quoted before, and some people were saying Christmas. But right now, I think official date is March 2025. But however, if we get any of those jets before the winter comes here or during winter, that'll be very helpful. Maybe the first jets will get here at that time. Practically all imported UAVs that Russia has were supplied to Russia from China, and that statement was voiced on the 16th of October from the head of the financial ministry, Siluanov, when during one of the meetings, he, for the first time on the public level, opened information about the source of UAVs in Russia. Today, for the most part, these UAVs are supplied from China, and he expressed gratitude to their Chinese partners. He also expressed hope that they do want to see most or all of the UAVs manufactured in Russia by 2025. So, do you want to comment anything here? Oh, yeah. First of all, it's very interesting to see how China will react to that statement, because even Iran asked Russia to not disclose their aid. Of course, Russia did spill the beans, and the world learned that Iran is participating in it, and Iran was very upset with Russia disclosing that detail. Now, I think China may get just as upset because Russia continues to present themselves as a terrible partner whom they cannot trust in terms of their mental capabilities and forward thinking. The other part is also the drones they're talking about, the UAVs that they're referring to from China. They, for the most part, are just monitoring UAVs. They're not striking UAVs. They're just observation units. These drones are probably like Mavic 3, but all military personnel and Ukrainian military, of course, know that they're dangerous. And even Israeli had a chance to verify how dangerous these systems are. There were other elements of data coming through that China is limiting the supply of Mavic 3s to Russia, and they're limiting the ones that can carry payloads and fly further, which actually caused certain protests in Russia. So maybe as a result of this issue that they've been having, they set China up because, hey, listen, now the world knows that you've been doing it, and bring them into the light to perhaps persuade them to continue supplying drones. And China likely will understand that as provocation from Russian side. The worst consequence would be if China would come out and confirm that yes, indeed, they're doing it. This would mean China actively participating, aligning with one of the sides in this conflict. I, of course, suspect that North Korea would not be able to provide anything without Chinese nod. But if China would officially confirm that, that would mean that they will be beefing up their position towards aiding Russia more. So that would be a more serious signal. And the West will likely have to react faster and better because increase in China's interference will likely lead Europe and the West and our other allies to engage deeper in this conflict. Factually, Chinese involvement and Korean involvement will be canceling the efforts of United States in aid in this conflict. And given the perspective of possible conflict between China and the United States out in the future, that takes a very different tone, the whole war. There's also another news, kind of funny, that comes in relation to Putin's visit to China, related to printing new Russian banknotes. Oh, you mean when they removed Muravyev Apostle from one of their banknotes? Yeah, they're actually, they have different banknotes matching the number of federal districts in Russia, and the far eastern Khabarovsk region had Muravyev-Amursky on the banknote. Oh, okay, so this is a good topic. It's a very specific one. Some viewers might know it, but China is calling the 19th century as the humiliation century. They had those boxer wars, and China back in the day was also a workshop of the world. Western countries were exploiting it in a pretty harsh regime, and then they started pushing opium sales in China, and there were a lot of attacks on Chinese sovereignty, and their people were, as a country, were generally humiliated. But in their memory, they predominantly consider Russia to be the most active actor that was humiliating them. And they're pointing towards the colonial policies of Moscow in that time of Russian Empire, and the fact that Russia signed several agreements taking away quite a bit of Chinese lands. So Muravyev-Amursky, who was removed from, I believe it was 5,000 ruble banknote, it was a gesture of Moscow to start somewhat client-patron relations with China, where China is a patron and Moscow is its client. But I want to send a message to our Chinese colleagues that Moscow is a very unreliable partner. They'll probably dump you every way they can, so think thrice before agreeing to anything with Russia. In any case, China is behaving like a real patron, with those Chinese maps coming out with Chinese names for Khabarovsk, Vladivostok, and a few other eastern cities in Russia. Alexey, at the very end of our stream, I cannot not ask the question about your exchange with Danilov. the head of Ukrainian National Security Council. He today made a statement addressing you, and he was kind of hinting in your direction. You were calling him up by a name in our streams. Don't know what you saw in addressing him directly. Today he came out pointing in your direction and stating that you might be working with and cooperating with Russian special services. And I don't know how to react to that. He did not name your name, but, oh, of course, yeah, he did not name my name, but he said actor, intel officer, military expert. Who else can be that? I did not call him directly today. I said Secretary of Ukrainian National Security Council office. Right. So what I want to say is that it's very miserable that this whole exchange is happening, that very high-level politicians of a country at war could have been, or bureaucrats, functionaries, could have been doing much more productive things for the country. But since it indeed happened, let's comment on this. First, let's gauge the level of professionalism of one of the representatives of the highest level of the military political leadership of Ukraine. And chief of Ukrainian National Security Office is a serious position in the org chart. First of all, what one can notice, he doesn't follow through with the ideas that he is wording out. Because if I am connected with Russian FSB, then there is a huge question to the Office of the President and to Ukrainian counterintel offices that they allowed for 2 years to be the main voice of the country at the beginning of war and to be involved in negotiations with Russia pre-war, to be a Moscow spy. So he basically accused half of the government security services that they're idiots, that they do not control what's happening here. Right now, I'm an independent, I'm a private person, but back then I was the official, right? I was the official speaker for the office of the president. So it's interesting to see how counterintel and other offices will react to that, and the office of the president will react to that statement and accusation. Second, he accused President of Ukraine and Yermak that they are hiring Russian spies and giving them the right of word. So they probably will be very delighted with that statement as well. Third, he formulated it rather interestingly. An intel officer, an actor, and an expert. Sort of attacking me as what do actors know, right? But if to compare myself and Zelensky from his words, at least I'm also an intel officer and an expert, right? So is he implying that president is incompetent as well? And Zelensky is his immediate manager. So he is twice incompetent for letting Russian spy and some puny actor to act and work for the highest level of power in the country. And at the same time, there's a question, if I'm so puny, then why am I drawing so much attention? If I'm so ineffective, then why does it matter? And another question, if he knew about that before, and if he has material evidence that I'm a Moscow spy, why was he quiet for these 2 years? If he didn't know, then what is the proof? So always it's a good idea to measure by the civilized countries, how they would do that. Imagine in the United States, one of the top security people in the country comes out and says that one of the main employees of the White House, main people working in the White House is a Moscow spy. What would happen there? The first question would probably be, what are the documents? What proof do you have? And he would either have to provide proof, or he would have to say, I don't have any. And then he would be torn apart by the system. Because in civilized countries, it's not applicable to act like this. I can imagine how American leadership would do in this situation, and I'm curious to see what Ukrainian leadership would do when they're being accused that they have Russian spies working for them for 2 years. And this shows once again how right I was when I wrote the article, which I entitled Monopoly of Incompetence, meaning the whole team that is now in power, with the rare exceptions at the very high level of leadership of the country and leadership of some special services. Because many of the others. They don't know what to prioritize during the times of war. They drop statements like this with a lot of consequences, which they haven't thought out. They accuse the leadership of enforcement agencies of the country and top leadership of the country that they are not competent and that they are putting our country in dire danger. And they essentially discredit leadership of the country being the part of that leadership. And then they're saying that these destructive forces are bringing upon cracks in the top military system of the country. So me currently, Alexey Arestovych, is unemployed, a private citizen, a blogger, and that's one thing. When the secretary of the Security Council of Ukraine pokes the society with these statements, that's probably the thing that causes cracks and more danger. So in a very short term, he ran a circle and is in that saying, the investigators caught themselves on the tail. And it once again highlights that he probably is occupying a very incompetent position for himself, a position for which he is totally incompetent, where he cannot calculate the consequences of his words and doing basically what they're accusing myself in to be part of. That's why I'm pushing for elections. That's why we need to change that office to a big degree. A lot of bureaucrats in Ukrainian echelons of power need to be removed and replaced because they are poking the country, causing cracks in our systems, and just breaking logistics and other lines. And he also highlighted another thing, that accusation of corruption can, in the times of war, only come from Moscow. And I want to bring attention upon the material that just surfaced not too long ago, where 78% of Ukrainians consider President of Ukraine to be responsible for the current level of corruption in Ukraine. So is he considering 78% of Ukrainians to be Moscow spies and bring upon these cracks in our society? Or they're just breaking apart our society by promoting Moscow narratives here? One thing if Arestovych said that, okay, he's a bad guy, but 78% of Ukrainians accuse president of being responsible for the high elite level of corruption in the country. Are they Moscow agents? They believed the bad man Arestovych and journalists who are digging up the corruption, right? That's the logic. So then how on earth did he allow Mikhail Tkach, Yuri Butusov, and other people? Mikhail Tkach has birthday today. You also have birthday? No, I'm joining in congratulations. So yes, happy birthday, Mikhail Tkach. So these people are poking our society. We are all Moscow agents, and journalists who investigate the corruption are the Moscow agents apparently too. So you think we can win the war with people like that? He's an idiot. He just signed an order under his idiocy. And he done it many times over before. That represents a level of incompetence and idiocy in some levels of our government. This is a direct threat to our country, not mythical Moscow agents. You understand, right? But statements like these and people in their positions like these. I want to say that security service actually checked my background and my everything many more times than they did Danilov. Because he started his biography in forestry, in the economic forestry sector. And I started in a command training academy where counter-intel were checking us 7 ways to Sunday on every level. And they were monitoring us all the way through. Why am I not in handcuffs yet, right? So he basically in a complete inadequate mode right now. And that inadequate person is in charge of security of yourselves and your relatives. In a little part of it, because he is not too useful anyway. I've seen him a couple times when he brought very big presentations in front of the president for to make some points. And then I've seen him making statements on TV, mixing Lugansk region with Russian territories. And if you think that your life is useless, and if you really have lost the goal of what you're doing in this life, don't forget that there is a position of a Secretary of National Security Council probably a very good position for you in this case, when you lost your bearings. Oh, it's difficult for me to address this topic. I did not expect that you will add more in this stream, in Danilov's address in this stream. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm stating the facts, Nikolai. If I wanted to really attack him, I would have said and used other words. I'm just making a statement here that the destiny of yours and your close ones is in hands of dangerously incompetent person. Thank you, dear Alexey, for sharing these considerations with us. We've been live for over an hour, 1 hour and 1 minute. I have a lot of desire to continue the stream and talk more about it, but we are on the time here, so let's move it to maybe Wednesday and pick it up there. Thank you. Thank you, dear viewers, for that, and thank you for watching the stream. Please do not forget to click the like button and subscribe if you have not done that yet to Alexey's channel, to Yuriy Romanenko, Alpha Media, and of course to the Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English. And we also did Mikhail Kaminsky stream. Side note from Privateer Station, we'll try to translate that as well for you guys in the next couple days. Till later.